Welcome to Locked On Heat. The Miami Heat take care of business with a win against the Brooklyn Nets on a milestone night for Bam Adebayo.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Join the Cookie Gang and become an everydayer. That means subscribing, tuning in every day, Monday through Friday, and signing up for the Everydayer Club with the link in the show notes. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. I'm Wes Goldberg, host of Locked On NBA Daily and Real GM Radio, doing a solo post-game show for you today from a room at the bottom of Kaseya Center. Recording this after the Heat's win over the Nets on Tuesday night. We've got credit cookies in the oven, listener questions to get to, but look, easy win for the Miami Heat, a business-like win, exactly what they needed to do against a tanky-tank type of Brooklyn Nets team that is actively trying to lose games. The Heat got an early lead. They did not let it go. No drama, nothing interesting, no excitement, no stress. They cruised to a win. We got a lot of Jameer Young and Myron Gardner minutes at the end. We could just put it that way. But look, we're monitoring the margins here on Locked On Heat. It's been a big conversation recently here on the show, and the Heat won the margin battles tonight. Offensive rebounding. They offensive rebounded the Brooklyn Nets 14-10. That created 17 second chance points for Miami. They forced 18 turnovers, which led to 20 points off of turnovers. That was a big margin battle for the Heat. They outshot them from three-point range, but as we've talked about here on the show, the Heat can't rely on three-pointers. You've got to win the margin battles, whether it's against bad teams, tanking teams like the Brooklyn Nets, or good teams. Again, it is something that we're monitoring here as we make this playoff push and we get closer to the postseason. The Heat are not good enough to win a lot of these games. They should be good enough to win this game against Brooklyn, regardless of the margin battles. But this is how you take care of business, right? When you hear business-like win in the NBA, what does that really mean? Does it mean that you shoot 48% from three and you just beat a bad team? No, that's not what that means. That's variance. That happens throughout an 82-game season, but that's not really taking care of business. When you hear the phrase taking care of business in the NBA, that's what that looks like. You're the bigger team, you're the more talented team, you're the more physical team, you're the healthier team. These are the margins that you should win, the physical margins. We're going to play harder than you, and that's how we're going to go about our business. And the Heat did that tonight. They played with that level of physicality, and I want to give credit to two players specifically for setting the tone for that physicality, Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro. Now, more on Tyler Herro a little bit later. I want to start with Bam, because to me, he was the player of the game. You want to give a game ball to somebody in Miami, give it to Bam. Number one, because big accomplishment for him, passes Giannis Haslam for number one all-time in Heat history in defensive rebounding with more than 4,100 defensive rebounds. A great accomplishment for Bam as he gets closer to the overall rebounding number, which Haslam has publicly, had some fun with, talking about how he doesn't want Bam to get that, and Bam kind of going at him publicly. This is something that's real. I can tell you it's not just something that I think it was on the Amazon Prime broadcast that they're just doing for TV. This is a real back and forth. We've heard it in practices when Haslam was part of the team, even when Haslam retired and is still around the team after practices or during practices here in Miami. This is something that Bam really wants, and I think it's something that Giannis Haslam is actively not looking forward to, because that's sort of Haslam's thing, right? This is not Haslam was the undrafted guy who scrapped and clawed his way to every single shred of playing time, and therefore every rebound that he did get, that's his record, and Bam is going to break it. It's just a matter of when and not if. And tonight was a major milestone in accomplishing that. Number one all-time in defensive rebounding in Heat history. But that's not necessarily what I want to talk about with Bam today, as great of a record as that is, and he does deserve the shout-out for it. I want to talk about his defense in this one. And specifically, the awards and the recognition that goes along with that. Bam's all-defensive team, I don't know if you remember, but Bam's all-defensive team streak was snapped last season. And, I don't know that Bam turned in his best defensive season of his career last year, but I also know that he probably should have been it probably should have been second team all defense last year. As a refresher, here's who was on the first team and who was on the second team all defense last year. First team was Dyson Daniels, Lou Dort, Draymond Green, Evan Mobley, and Amen Thompson. The seasons that those players had last year, you can't really take any of those guys off of first team. They were all sensational. Second team was Toumani Camara, Rudy Gobert, Jaren Jackson Jr., Jalen Williams, and Ivica Zubac. I thought Zubac had a case for first team all defense. He ends up being second team. Rudy Gobert is kind of like Bam, where you just assume that he's going to be on one of these teams every single year. Gobert made it. Bam did not. I didn't think it was Gobert's best defensive season. I think I did have Bam over Gobert on my fake ballot last year. Kamara was sensational, but Bam made a point at the end of the game, in the post-game media session tonight. He thinks that the criteria has changed, and he mentioned specifically guys on losing teams, non-playoff teams, making all defensive teams. He does not think, he thinks that a player on a losing team shouldn't necessarily qualify. Based on what he was saying in the post game. And I think he's talking about a guy like Toumani Camara, who was playing for a bad Portland team last year. Jalen Williams was also on it. He was for the champion Thunder teams. I think he deserved to be on it. But I would have probably had Bam on my second team, maybe over Jalen Williams or over Jaren Jackson Jr., over Gobert or Camara. I think you could have made a case for any of it. Bam was right there with all of those guys. All of those guys were great and deserving of second team, but I think you could have made the case for Bam over or instead of any of those guys on the second team. That said, the streak was snapped, right? I mean, he made first team in 2023-24. He made second team in 2023, second team in 2022. He was second team in 2021. He was second team in 2020. He was, and that was the beginning of the streak there. So he's only got one first team. He's only been on first team all defense once, which was in 2024. I think there probably should have been more in there, and I think he should definitely be on all defense this year. Like I said, I thought he set the tone early in this game. 4 steals in the first quarter for Bam in this one. I thought he ate Nick Claxton's lunch in this game on both ends of the court, but specifically defensively. He didn't allow anything. Miami's defense was great all night long. Now, look, it's the Brooklyn Nets. You don't want to make too much of it, but this was a top-notch Bam defensive game. If you want reasons to vote Bam all defensive team or whatever like that, turn the film on. There's a lot of games that you can turn the film on, but this would be one of them that I would direct people towards. Look, in setting the tone for this one, though, you go back to the business-like theme here, right? What does that look like? It means setting the tone early with the physicality, being the better team, being the more physical team, being the more talented team, being the healthier team, being the stronger team. Bam set the tone for that. The Heat clearly want to avoid the play-in tournament. And that is the goal for this week, right? You play the tanky Brooklyn Nets twice on Tuesday and Thursday, and then you get Charlotte on Friday. So you got 2 chances, easy chances for wins here, Tuesday and Thursday, and then the second night of back-to-back on Charlotte with a chance to build ground on Charlotte, get another division win, which is important, and a good win as the Heat try to move up the standings here. I asked Eric Spoelstra about using that as motivation, right? You obviously want to take care of business against Brooklyn and go into that game against Charlotte on Friday night with some momentum, but we've heard Bam and Tyler talk about this recently, how this team does not want to be back in the play-in tournament, that they're frustrated that they're even in this situation to begin with. Eric Spoelstra, we've heard him over the years, and especially this year, talk about, hey, we can't get caught looking at the standings. We got to take care of our business. Coach speak, typical stuff. But I asked him, how do you balance the not looking at the standings with using this as real motivation? And he said it should serve as motivation, and I hope that it does. And I thought in this game, it clearly did. The Heat, with this win, worth noting here, they are going to they are now 1 game behind Philadelphia, 1 loss behind Philadelphia in the loss column for that 6th seed. Philadelphia lost to the Spurs tonight. They did not have Joel Embiid in that game. They got wiped away by San Antonio. So now Miami inches closer to Philly for that 6th seed, very much in range. And you look at the schedule right now that's facing all of these teams that the Heat are dealing with here, fighting for positioning in the standings with Miami. They have Brooklyn on Thursday, Charlotte on the second night of a back-to-back on Friday. Then it's Detroit and Washington. That's their next 4 games. Look at Philly. They've got Utah, Atlanta, at Cleveland, Memphis. Now, Joel Embiid missed the Sixers practice a couple days ago. He's they're reporting increased soreness with his injury on his right side. He's been dealing with the rib stuff basically since they played the Heat. That's something to monitor here, right? Philly against Utah, Atlanta, Cleveland, Memphis. You would assume that they would go at least 3-1, potentially even 4-0 against that slate. But if Embiid's going to miss time, maybe they can, could Philly lose to Cleveland and another game in there somewhere? Could they go 2-2 while Miami goes 3-1? Miami has to beat Brooklyn on Thursday, just like they took care of business tonight, and they have to beat Charlotte on Friday. So can Miami go at least 3-1 over their next 3 games, maybe losing to Detroit, beat Washington, right? That's what you would presume. Philly, can you go 2-2 in that stretch? And then Orlando is right there too. We should mention them. They're right now in 7th, Miami in 8th in the standings. Orlando can easily go 1-3 in their next 4. You look at their schedule: Dallas, Minnesota. They play Milwaukee on the second night of back-to-back. Giannis is back for them. And then they play Cleveland. So Orlando also dealing with their own injuries to Franz Wagner, and Jalen Suggs is in and out. That's a team that could easily go 1-3 during that stretch. So these next 4 games are really big for the Heat, and we are standings watching, or watching the standings rather here on Locked On Heat. We're going to talk about this game a little bit more. I've got credit cookies in the oven. We're going to hand them out next. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar that you deserve, while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person, and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Being part of the Cookie Gang and becoming an everydayer comes with some great perks, including ad-free shows. Plus, if you join the all-access tier, you get even more, including text message updates like running game notes that I sent to the Everydayer Club Cookie Gang tonight. You get injury news, transaction rumors around the trade deadline and the draft and the offseason, all sent directly to you via text. You'll also get a chance to text us questions for post-game shows like this one. If you're interested in being part of the Cookie Gang and joining the Everydayer Club, tap the link in the show notes or head to LockedOnHeat.supercast.com to learn more. Well, it's another Miami Heat win, which means it's time for the tasty segment of Locked On Heat. It is time to hand out credit cookies. I get the honor of handing out these cookies today. I've got 10 cookies to give out. I'm going to start with Bam Adebayo. We talked about him in the first segment, setting the tone in this one. A sublime performance for Bam. He gets 4 credit cookies for this game. Matches the amount of steals he had in the first quarter. It's not necessarily why I did it, just a coincidence. 4 steals in the first quarter on his way to 6 steals overall. But I want to go away from the defense here for a second. He had a spin move in transition early in this game that reminded me of like peak athletic Toronto Raptors Pascal Siakam. Remember we called him Spicy P, and he had that spin move that he would always hit in transition. Bam hit that in transition. I don't know what happened from to Bam since the All-Star break, but he's just like going into his bag of tricks like every other game right now and just showing. He had like a kind of a quasi dream shake the other night or against Atlanta, I think, in the first game back from the All-Star break. He's doing things in the post against Memphis in the second game from the All-Star break. He's breaking out the spin move in this one. I like it. I'm here for it. Obviously, I don't want Bam to just be this guy who's forced to take threes in this new offense. Him getting out in transition is huge. I thought his transition game offensively was so impressive in this game. Not just with the spin move in transition, flashbacks to Spicy P stuff. He had 2 really nice little kick-ahead passes in transition, one to Wiggins and one to Jaquez in this game. Playmaking in transition, scoring in transition. This is the stuff that you want to see from Bam. We know his limitations in the half court, right? He's a streaky shooter from three-point range. That mid-range shot, you don't want to be over-reliant on it the way that he was a couple seasons ago where it felt like every shot he was taking was that free throw line jumper. He still got it, right? He could still get to that when he needs to. But without the pick and roll in this offense, his ability to get to the rim in the half court has been blunted a little bit. But this is the way to make up for that, right? you force opportunities to get in transition, and then you run in transition. 6 steals led to real points for Bam and for his teammates for the Miami Heat in this game. You love to see it. But you go back to what he did defensively in this game, setting the tone. He was switching when he needed to. He was locking down Brooklyn centers. Like Nick Claxton, after a really nice year a couple years ago, has pretty much fallen off. Bam ate his lunch in this game, man. Like, this wasn't even close. Claxton was a minus 19. Bam was a plus 22. There you go. I don't always use plus minus for qualitative kind of analysis here, but that tells you the story of how the game went, right? The Brooklyn Nets could not win their minutes with their starting center on the court, and Miami dominated their minutes with their starting center on the court. Bam was clearly, I thought, the best two-way player in the game tonight. It's why he gets the most credit cookies with 4. And I said it in the first segment. If you want to play the film on a reason why Bam deserves a spot on one of these all-defensive teams, you can queue this one up if you want. There's other games that you can obviously queue up. I think Bam is having a sensational defensive season. There was a point where I thought he should be in the running for Defensive Player of the Year, although as long as Wemby is going to qualify, it looks like it's going to be his going away. I looked at FanDuel's odds right before I started recording here. Bam's like far off the board. He's like not even a guy here. So whatever. I guess it's not going to be Bam's year for DPOY, but he should be a clear, like sort of automatic for all defensive team. I hope he gets it. We're going to talk about it more on this episode, on this show. I hope more people start talking about it more. But look, if you look up a Bam game in the dictionary, it might look like this one. Wasn't a loud game for him offensively, right? 23 points was good on 11 of 24 shooting, so it wasn't the most efficient shooting night for him. 0 free throw attempts. I would have liked to see him get to the line a little bit more, but the Heat didn't get to the line a ton in this one. 24 free throw attempts overall as a team. And Bam, like I said, he did a lot of his work in transition where there just wasn't really guys around him to foul him. So that's fine. 1 of 7 from three-point range, which wasn't my favorite. But if you take away the threes, we're talking about a 10 of 17 night from 2-point range, and that's quite good. That's a good efficiency. He was playmaking, right, with the 4 assists. This was just a two-way, not overly loud, not overly dominant, but just a controlled tempo-setting game from Bam. If you look up a Bam game in the dictionary, it's going to look very similar to this one. Next guy getting credit cookies, Tyler Herro. 2 credit cookies for Tyler Herro. I enjoyed this game. It was not the best Tyler Herro game, but I enjoyed this one from him. 22 points on 8 of 15 shooting, 1 of 4 from three-point range. Tyler talking about this at the end of the game, about how that 3-ball hasn't really come around. He hasn't really found his rhythm in that since he came back from injury. And anecdotally, I kind of just nodded my head and agreed when he was talking about it. Spo was talking about it too. Then I looked at stats. Tyler Herro is shooting 38% from 3 since he came back. It's not like he's been bad from three-point range. I do think what we're seeing is the lack of quantity. He's not doing it in volume. He is clearly not comfortable with those catch-and-shoot threes right now in this offense. And with his rhythm coming back from, right, he's been dealing with the foot thing, the rib injuries, all that stuff. But for whatever reason, he's very comfortable getting to the basket. And that's why I said I enjoyed this game from Tyler. 7 of 11 on 2s. I loved his drive game in this game. He obviously got to the floaters, but there was a number of drives where he got all the way to the basket, trying to draw contact, did draw contact. I thought I let the refs kind of fumbled a couple of calls for him. For him in this game. I thought he could have gotten to the line a couple more times in this game, but overall, I mentioned how both Bam and Tyler Herro set the tone for this game and the physicality that I thought Miami played with. And I think Herro offensively, with the way that he was driving to the basket, only 4 three-point attempts for Herro in this game. Bam had 7. Only 4 three-point attempts for Herro in this game. He clearly made a decision to get to the basket. And I thought that was evident early on. It was also a reminder that he's a legitimate 3-level scorer, does not need to rely on threes. And like I said, he said after the game, just wait until the 3-ball goes in. And when he starts feeling a lot more comfortable with that, and again, I think there's some rhythm stuff with this offense that requires him to take those early catch-and-shoot threes. The Heat coaching staff, by the way, has talked to Tyler Herro. They're pointing it out. Herro's watching the film. They're finding spots where he can take those catch-and-shoot threes early in the shot clock, where Herro's passed up a few of those over the last few games. they want him to take those. They're trying to get him to take those. I think Herro's going to get there. Just a reminder, he did not participate in training camp when they were installing this offense. So this offense is newer to him than it is for everybody else. I think he's still figuring parts of this offense out and specifically picking his spots. But as much as that has maybe been an uphill climb here and there's been a learning curve there, he was really quick to make decisions in terms of, putting the ball on the floor and getting to the basket. And again, I love seeing that level of aggression from Tyler Herro. I thought it helped set the tone for Miami, their physicality on the offensive end. Andrew Wiggins is going to get a credit cookie, just the one. Not a loud night, but an important night, I thought, for Andrew Wiggins. And what I'm giving him the points for, like, we could look at the box score. He had 13 points on 5-9 shooting. Had the 2 offensive rebounds. I love monitoring Wiggins' offensive rebounds, 7 rebounds overall. Had 3 blocks in this game as well. So I like the overall defensive game from Wiggins. What I appreciated the most from him and why he's getting this cookie, though, he played denial defense on Michael Porter Jr. from the jump. This was not just typical, hey, MPJ can catch it, but I'm going to close out. I'm going to play tight on him. I'm not going to let him get off open threes. Wiggins was playing denial defense, face guarding him a lot of this game. And you look at the game that Michael Porter Jr. had, 3 of 17 shooting, went 0 for 9 from three-point range, and I would say probably all 9 of those were contested. I don't remember an open one that he got. I could be missing one. I could be forgetting one, but he was really bad in this game. And look, this was a blowout win, right? But it was a blowout win in part because they didn't allow Michael Porter Jr., who was a bubble all-star this year, to pop off, right? If Michael Porter Jr. pops off, this game could have gotten interesting. And because of Wiggins and the way that he was guarding MPJ in this one, they didn't allow him to get. So it wasn't a loud night. It's not going to show up in the box score necessarily on the Wiggins part of it. But I thought it was an important night for Wiggins overall. I think he's very deserving of that credit cookie. Moving on to Jaime Jaquez Jr. He's getting 2 credit cookies in this game. 20 points for him off the bench. Went 2 for 3 on threes. And then Kel'el Ware is going to get 1 credit cookie. I'm going to talk about him more in the next segment. Up and down game for him, but overall came away impressed. We're going to talk about that, plus get to some of our listener questions on the other side. Today's episode of Locked On Heat is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena, the crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. I pulled up the Game Time app, I picked an upcoming NBA game, and I had tickets locked in within minutes. I love seeing the all-in price up front, which means no surprise fees at checkout. I was able to see the view from my seat before I bought, making my decision easy, and I did it with confidence. The zone deals really stood out. I chose the section, Game Time picked the seats, and I saved money. They also have great last-minute options, too, with NBA tickets showing up at solid prices right until tip-off. Everything with Game Time feels quick, intuitive, and stress-free from start to finish. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today, and remember, it's gametime.co, not gametime.com. We'll be right back. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Back here to finish up our credit cookie segment, Kel'el Ware gets 1 credit cookie. Up and down game for him. Picks up 3 fouls in 22 seconds early in the game, but I thought he bounced back well. Was a net positive overall. Finishes with 5 steals and 7 offensive rebounds. Those are my 2 favorite stats from him in this game, and 2 plays that stand out as it relates to the steals and the offensive rebounds that I want to talk about here. Kel'el Ware makes a leaping steal in the 4th quarter that uses his entire wingspan. So sort of uncoils. Brooklyn was trying to make a cross-court pass. Ware is somewhere near the free throw line and just jumps up and grabs the ball. It leads to a Bam Adebayo layup in transition. And one of the reasons I love that play in particular is because we don't really see situations where Bam and Ware interact a ton on the floor, if that makes a lot of sense. Like, they're playing together more, but they're not really playing off of each other, right? Like, offensively, this team doesn't run high-low actions. And defensively, right, like they communicate and they're part of the zone together and the back line and all that stuff. But this was one of those rare instances where you actually saw Ware do something, a game-changing type of play that made Bam Adebayo better, right? We don't really see that a ton either way, right? We don't really see Bam lead to Ware points or something that Ware does lead to Bam points. And that's one of the reasons I love that play. The other play that I loved, again, it was a Bam and Ware play here. Earlier in the game, Bam gets a steal, goes coast to coast, goes to finish for the layup, misses the layup, but Kel'el Ware is there for the putback. It was a quiet play, might have been overlooked, but the reason I liked it was kind of going back to the theme of the show, the physicality that this team was playing with, the taking care of business. That was Kel'el Ware doing his job. When you're the big man, when you're the center, your job is to trail the play, especially when you're a center like Kel'el, who could be the trail three-point guy too. But as Bam went all the way to the basket, Kel'el didn't stop at the three-point line. He went all the way with Bam to the rim, knowing that, hey, I've got to keep running. I got to run the full length of the court because maybe Bam makes a shot and I ran for no reason, but maybe he misses it and I'm going to be there for the putback, and that's exactly what Kel'el did. Quiet play, but one of those things that gets shouted out on film tomorrow, and Kel'el Ware gets like a gold sticker or something like that after the game. I thought it was a really good Kel'el Ware game, or not really good, but I was impressed overall. 11 points, 13 rebounds, 5 steals. No blocks, kind of a weird box score for him, but an effective game overall for Kel'el. And again, I like the way that he bounced back after picking up getting in that early foul trouble and not letting that take him out of his game completely. I thought it was a mature, sort of, again, business-like game from Kel'el, so he gets 1 credit cookie. All right, let's get to our questions from the Cookie Gang. You can submit questions for post-game shows like this one by joining the Everydayer Club. Tap the link in the show notes to learn more. This question comes from Jonah, who writes in, Kel'el Ware seems to have turned a bit of a corner post All-Star break. Do you see it too, or am I just seeking out what I hope to see? Follow-up, what do you think of the take that we should sell high on Ware now? I'll start with the first part of this question, that Ware seems to maybe have turned a corner. I don't know that I would go that far in terms of turning the corner. I think it's just been an up and down season for him in general. I don't think he's had his best games of the season since the All-Star break. I think he's had better games earlier when he was on that double-double stretch and all those things. But look, I think it's been a good stretch here for Kel'el. Maybe not as up and down as it had been pre-All-Star break. Maybe it's a little bit more consistent. So maybe he's not reaching the same highs as he did, but he's also not hitting those same lows. There are some boneheaded plays, some defensive miscues here and there, even since the break. But overall, I think it's been more solid. I also want to point this out, that we are seeing more minutes of Bam and Ware on the court together right now. But because they're not starting, those minutes are coming against, instead of the opposing starters, against opposing reserves more often than not. And when we talk about that plus minus for the Bam and Ware minutes trending in the right direction, I'm not necessarily saying it's because they're going against bench players as opposed to starters now, because when it was in a negative, it was after they had started quite a bit of games together. But that could be something. That could be a factor in this. Now, that said, Bam and Ware together were a +8 in about 17 minutes tonight. I thought they were really good together in this game, but this was against a bad Brooklyn team. I don't know that you want to take away a ton from this game based on the opponent. But you play who's in front of you, and you try to, develop your habits and do the right things. And I do think that Ware and Bam have been trending in the right direction together since the All-Star break. And I did like what I saw today. We talked about some of the plays that they made together in this game already. In terms of whether or not you want to sell high on Bam, look, if he keeps playing like this, he then maybe becomes a more interesting piece in a Giannis or Donovan Mitchell trade. And I think you would still have to include him in a trade like that. But that's kind of obvious. In terms of the question, like selling high on Ware, like what are we talking about exactly there? Like, would you do something like trade him for a team in need of a center for maybe an unprotected or a very lightly protected first-round pick in the future that could potentially that could potentially become a top 5 pick? Maybe, I guess that's what you might be talking about there. But in terms of selling high, I just don't really know what you do with a center like Kel'el if you're not trading him as a blue chip piece in terms of a superstar trade. And I don't really see this team just trading a good player for the potential of a draft pick in the future, even if that might be kind of an interesting creative way to go get a pick that could potentially become a top 5 pick without having to tank, right? And I do think that the Heat should explore ways to do that, maybe not necessarily doing that by trading Kel'el, but we'll see. Last question that we have from Malachi writes in, I may have a stupid question, but why haven't we seen or heard much of anything about Vlad Golden? It seemed like they were so eager to sign him to a two-way contract, and he hasn't really gotten a chance to play in any NBA games. I thought we would have saw Vlad a little bit more after they signed him after the draft to a two-way contract. They signed him right away, scooped him up, signed him right away to a two-way, so they obviously liked something there. But I wouldn't read too much into it. Just because he's not ready to play now doesn't mean he won't ever be ready. There's clearly some concerns there about his, I think, defensive foot speed. And just, the center position, as we've seen, if you're not a freak athlete, the learning curve is really steep. So I think that they're willing to work with him. Everything I hear about Vlad, by the way, is positive. I don't really hear anything negative about him. He's a good locker room guy. Teammates like him. He's doing the work. But, yeah, the Heat have clearly decided, look, we don't really want a reserve center on the roster. And if we did really need a break glass in case of emergency type center, I guess we have Vlad Golden on a two-way. But in general, they've played Kashad Johnson over Vlad Golden as a emergency center. So they've made that decision. If it's not Bam and if it's not Ware, they're going to go small with Nico or Kashad or something like that in an emergency center situation. So that's where they're at. But I wouldn't read too much into this to the point of the question. Vlad not playing. It doesn't mean that he's not doing anything right. It doesn't mean he's not developing in the right way. It just means that he's not ready right now, but he could be ready in the future. Thanks for tuning in today to Locked On Heat. Make sure that you subscribe and follow Locked On Heat so you get all of the latest episodes. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Join the Cookie Gang and get Locked On Heat ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonheat.supercast.com to join the club.